I would have totally forgotten, Gina, so thank you.
Just because I do that all the time.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, Gina Tzizik is an early childhood education administrator, Montessori teacher, trainer, and passionate advocate for spirituality and mindfulness in early childhood education. Her education and artistic work intersect, merging the true essence of the richness of her experience of education, spirituality, and art. She's an artist and a painter, and if you could see behind me, this is one of her pieces. I love it. I look at it every day. So she's inspired really by the vibrant colors of the ocean and the changing light of the natural world surrounding her. And Gina integrates her spiritual perspective into her print and paintings. I proudly say that Gina earned her master's degree from Hebrew College in 2022, woohoo, just last year. And Gina also holds a master's degree from Endicott College locally in Beverly in Montessori education. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to you, Gina.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm delighted to be here with everyone, and I have a lot of information to share with you today, and I just want you to know that there are handouts. So you'll have all the information. They're going to send it to you. So don't worry about taking a lot of notes. And Susan's going to put links in the chat so that you've got it. This is a really big topic to have in a 1 hour period, but I'm hoping to give you a little more than just a broad brush, to really think about what Hesed means and how we can change the world with this idea that's so universal in education, no matter if you're working in early childhood or with teens or with adults. I think it all applies. I'm going to jump into the presentation and then we can talk. Susan will be looking at the chat. So if you have questions, there will be time for that. And you can also raise your hand and we can answer questions as you go along. Okay. Okay, so Hesed, loving kindness. The first thing for today, our agenda is, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my journey and how I got to this place, because I think it's really important for the foundation of what we're going to talk about. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the educational foundations, in particular, one idea called the absorbent mind, and that will lay the foundation for how this idea can change the world. Then we're going to look at the handouts, and then we'll have some closing thoughts about it. So it sounds like it'll be really fast, but there's a lot of slides in between. I just wanted to give you an idea of what to think about. So Hesed, loving kindness, it's a universal value, reminding us that we are at the center of improving the world. Hesed offers us the opportunity to contribute our whole selves to the world. It really is out there grabbing us, encouraging us to be ourselves and to share that with the world. It's probably one of the most important ideas that I've ever encountered, and one that I continually am grappling with or wrestling with in my own life. So the idea started with me when I took a course by Rabbi Art Green at Hebrew College, when he was talking about the Kabbalah, and he was talking about a lot of stuff that I honestly didn't understand. But it opened enough in me that I wanted to do some more research. I wanted to think about it. And the way that he described it, and this is coming through me now, he talked a little bit about this idea of the universe, of Hesed being the light of the universe and the creation, and that God brought that out from the beginning of time to the end of time. So I'm imagining this amazing light out there, wherever it is, and we can all be part of it. We can all go in and taste some of it like a buffet. Then there's this realization that not every—
Did the furnace kick on?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to ask anybody, if you haven't muted, that would be great while I figure out how to mute you. But anybody, if you're not muted, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry.
71 in here.
Anyway, so that beautiful light of the universe was broken up by God into pieces of light. And that's where the inspiration for all of my work with my Kabbalah cards and with my art came into play. Thinking about this idea that God broke up Hesed into pieces, it came down, and that our one job is to go through and find our piece of light and to elevate that back up. What a powerful idea for children to think that they actually have a purpose in this world in terms of the elevation. So the world was created with Hesed, this selfless act of love and creation. Hesed is mentioned 248 times in the Torah, 500 times in the Talmud, and 2,000 times in the Midrash. So I think it's really important for us to think about how important this foundation of Hesed is and where we interact with this in our lives. Sorry, I'm trying to, there we go. So in my journey at Hebrew College, I spent about 4 years thinking about a variety of things with Jewish education, changing and transforming myself. What I realized was there was really just one job for us in Jewish education and in life, and that is listening to our inner voice. Hesed calls us to be who we truly are, to be our unique selves. And as an early childhood educator, I know that children come into us, they come to us at every age, and they want to know, how am I unique? What do I have to offer the world? Where do I fit into this community of the world, the Jewish community, into our schools? So Hesed calls us to be ourselves, gracious humility, a generosity of spirit, giving and receiving. These are all aspects that we want to integrate into our educational foundation. So we're being called to remember our own beauty, our genius, to allow our powerful voice to be heard in the universe, and to challenge ourselves to live a life that is filled with and embraced by Hesed, loving kindness, graciousness, offering the inside of ourselves to the world. Hesed asks us to open up our hearts as wide as possible. It seems like the easiest possible thing that we can do, to be ourselves. And as educators, we want to encourage the children that we encounter, or the parents we encounter, to be themselves and to offer it out. But we live in a world that really doesn't embrace it. We live in a world that can make us believe that suffering is really the way to growth, that suffering is what actually makes us the most human and gives us the most depth. And it certainly does give us depth, but I don't think that's what we're being called to do. I think we're being called to be joyful. We're being called to be generous. We're being called to be soulful and to be ourselves, and to have the courage to be ourselves. So how do we do that in an educational setting? How do we help children to see that they are okay the way that they are? So I started with one question. The question was, in what ways does exposing teachers to Jewish value words enhance their expression in teaching in a school? Because I realized in my work that many teachers didn't have their own experience, didn't really understand maybe some of the rituals or the words. They may not have ever heard Hebrew. A lot of teachers that work in Jewish environments may not be Jewish. They may be coming in to work in the community and share their expertise in other areas. So what happens if we start having a conversation? So my research started with having a conversation with teachers about Hesed. What did it mean, and why is it important for us? The conversations that I had in my research were 1 hour with a variety of different teachers. Many of them were not Jewish and had never heard of Hesed. They'd all heard of loving kindness, but they really didn't connect to them. So we started with, what do children need? What do you think children need? If you could write in the chat just one word, what do children need? Just take a minute. Think of the first thing that comes to your mind. If you could just pick one thing. Susan, I'm going to ask you to read them because I can't see the chat in this screen.
Sure, I would love to. Okay, let me just get back up to where we started. So acceptance, kindness, compassion, love, nurturance, love, belonging, authenticity, hug, love that, compassion, kindness.
Wow. So those are the words that join us together. Those are the aspects of this multifaceted idea of Hesed, like a diamond, that we could talk all day about all of the words that could fit inside of this one idea of loving kindness, of generosity of spirit, of compassion. All of those things connect us as educators. So we know what children need. I didn't hear anything about reading and writing, memorizing prayers or rituals. None of that was in our chat. What we're talking about is those very soft ideas that make us human and that connect us as humans. So words matter. How we use words connect our world. They become the bridge to the world that we live in. They framework the environment that we live in internally and externally. So how do the words that you gave connect children to Hesed? Does anybody want to say anything about that?
I see.
More like we demonstrate these values, model them.
They help us to demonstrate, they help us to model. But what I found when I was talking with the schools, when we had this conversation about what Hesed really meant and what loving kindness meant in a practical way in their environment, the idea that we said the words elevated the conversation, that we were thinking deeper just by throwing out 5 or 6 words, 10 words that may be connectors. So actually talking with people about our values matters. Even if we don't agree on what those values are, it actually changed how they looked at the environment. So we were looking at early childhood environments, thinking about how are we loving? How are we kind? How are we showing this to children, and how are children interpreting what we are thinking about? So when we think about words, it's an important framework to know that it does matter to actually say the words. So this is from a lecture from 2020 with Art Green. God speaks the world into being. Our verbal creativity is part of God's creation. God is the cosmic Kabbalist of sacred letters. When we enact rituals, we raise them to the light. It is our acts that bring the holiness. They are not holy within themselves. So when we take words and we take rituals or acts or actions and we connect them together, we begin to elevate what we're doing with our consciousness about what's happening. Not just having a book in the room, but actually thinking about the words that we're using, how we're using them, and how we're connecting them for children, because they're watching us. They're absorbing everything that's coming through. So the project, as I explained, it started with the words. It started with the word Hesed. I wanted to understand a little bit of Kabbalah, the tree of life. What did it really mean? I spent a very long time immersing myself in these words to the point where I felt like the words were actually dancing around with me for a long time. Because I'm an artist, I thought about these words in colors and shapes and forms. But before we go into what I did, I would like you to put in the chat What does Hesed mean to you? Can you boil it down to just 1 or 2 words that you could share with the group?
So we have care and sacred kindness, the way to be, unconditional giving, sharing with others, embracing each act with kindness, making the world a better place. Feel free to keep them coming. Fulfilled, caring for each other.
So those are beautiful words. Those are beautiful ideas. So these are the real values that we want to give children. You know, how do we give children the idea of sacred? You know, that's a really big word, but it's a really important word to connect with something like Hesed. Unconditional love, giving. Giving isn't really just about doing something for someone. It's about our intention behind it. It's about what we receive from the giving. So there's all these complexities involved that we want to be able to bring into our classrooms, to bring into our communities, and to actually embrace Hesed in that way. So I'd like to start with the most important foundation. It's called the absorbent mind, and this is how a person is formed. The absorbent mind is an intense period of brain development and absorption of the environment. The child spontaneously absorbs everything in their environment like a photograph. So this is an idea that no matter what we are doing, and it is not conscious, the child from birth or pre-birth until the age of 6 is in the most intense period of the absorbent mind. So everything is coming into them. It's like they're snapping photographs of everything that's happening, the tone of voice, what things smell like, how they look, how they feel, all of the time. So think about that when you're dealing with children. After the age of 6, we are still absorbing. It becomes more conscious the older and older we get. We are all still absorbing our environments. If you think about just very quickly, when you walk into somewhere and you automatically feel like, this feels like home. And then you go somewhere else, like maybe Costco, and you're like overwhelmed by how tall everything is and how many things and how many people are there. We consciously can kind of put that aside and say, this is too much for me. I'm going to leave this environment. Children can't do that, but we can do it. But we're still absorbing all of those pieces. And it's really the foundation of a lot of scientific research. So Dr. Maria Montessori was the first person to recognize this about 120 years ago. She said that it was a unique aspect of early development in children, which she did term the absorbent mind. She wrote an entire book about how this works called the absorbent mind, and we'll have a link to it in the chat. So recent research has confirmed this vital understanding as important, and that this period of development is essential for the formation of the adult from early childhood into the adult. It's all been incorporated. So we have a lot of research, and these are 2 of my favorite people that I would like to recommend. So Dr. Bruce Perry wrote What Happened to You. It's an excellent book. He talks a lot about the kind of the essence of childhood and how that connects to the development of the person, of how they see the world. So if we want gracious, kind, happy, joyful children, we need to really think about the environments that children are in, and also how they are connecting to their community. So Dr. Bruce Perry is one. He also wrote another book, Born for Love, which I would recommend. And then we have Gabor Mate, and he's another scientist. He talks a lot about addiction and illness and the effect of the absorbent mind in early childhood, bringing that into adulthood. And I found all of their research very, very important in terms of thinking about what we're doing and how conscious we need to be as educators, how we're speaking with children, what kinds of environments they're in, what's really important in terms of our value. Because what I know after the many years that I've been with young children, is they are not only listening to our words, they are listening to what we do. And if they're not in connection, children learn that adults don't tell the truth. And unfortunately, this is a really big piece of early childhood where children are told to do one thing, but they don't see adults doing it. And they don't see it in their communities either. In their faith communities, they're not seeing the value being lived out there. So this is we could talk all day about this, but I just want to throw that out to you. So why is this important? How do we model for children? Everything that we do is being absorbed. So they are experiencing Hesed by seeing us do acts of loving kindness. How do we greet each other? How do we talk about people? What are the ways that we are being honest with ourselves and allowing children to see that? So what's our emotional intelligence in the environments that we work in? Are we sharing? Are we gracious? Are we kind? Do we allow people to understand when we're feeling upset or not feeling upset? Children of all ages are in tune to this, like radio receptors. So the more we think about that in terms of the framework, the better it's going to be for the child. But then we have to kind of narrow it down a little bit in our schools and in our communities. How are the values that we put in our brochures and have in frames on the wall, how are they being lived out day to day? Are we saying good morning to each other, to every single person in our school, even the ones we don't necessarily like? So these are things that are being noticed. How do we jump over really difficult situations? And are we using Hesed in order to address that and allowing children to see that we can disagree, that we can also have contentious situations that don't have to be hurtful, or we can have discussions like that. So it's really, really important when we look at it through the absorbent mind. So what we know is all culture is absorbed. If we think about children in a family, they know, how loud everybody talks, what holidays. Just think about Thanksgiving. If you ask any person in America about Thanksgiving, they're going to tell you the kind of stuffing they like, and if they like gravy, and if they like turkey, and what vegetables they have. So all of those things are part of the culture of individual families and the culture of people that live in the United States. So language is absorbed. All of the nuances of our language or of multiple languages in a home are automatically absorbed by the child. Because their brain in the first 2 months is almost doubling. It is an incredible thought to think about how many receptors. It's like popcorn popping all of the time. And then from the later, maybe age 6 on forward, that's going to be the rest of your development. So there's a lot happening in this time. So it is an opportunity for us to let children absorb Jewish culture, Jewish values, Jewish kindness, Jewish acceptance. So if you think about that, if we have ritual objects in our environments, if we're celebrating rituals, if we're talking about our social and emotional ideas and feelings with children, they begin to make those connections and it builds their world. So all of these things contribute to the daily experience of Hesed and its true meaning. When we look at this child here, looking at these pictures, this child isn't going to talk and say, hey, what's this little guy doing? He's absorbing that all in there. He's sitting nestled with his mom, looking at that book. They're not on, an iPad being read by some computer voice. This is the touch and the feel, the smell, all of those very old-fashioned ideas that really do activate the brain of the child in order to absorb into themselves what they need. So what are some rituals that you have in your daily life or your classroom that you think are examples of Hesed? Some of them would be, for example, in a Montessori classroom, the teacher is at the door greeting every child and every adult that comes in. Normally they're shaking their hand and they're making sure that they make eye contact. And that's just a respect of saying, I know you're here. I see you. Come into the environment. So think about that yourself. When you go somewhere and you're not acknowledged, you don't know if anybody sees that you're there, or does it even matter that you're there? This is the beginning of that attachment and connection for young children. So in a Jewish environment, being able to connect immediately with that welcoming is, I think, one of the most important areas of how we can bring Hesed very easily into our environments. Setting tables, having beautiful environments. Would anybody like to share something in your own school or community that you believe shows Hesed in your environment?
I'm looking if there's anybody just want to jump in. Otherwise, I'm looking for hands.
If not, we can move on. Any hands up?
No, but oh, I see what Susie Rodenstein.
Hi, Gina. Thank you so much for this talk. I also worked on this principle you just discussed about how we can welcome children into a space when I was an education director at KI in Brookline many years ago. And the greeting each child really led to so many conversations with those children afterwards. I recognized them. I let them know that they were important to me, that each and every one of them was so important to me that I took the time to greet them personally. If I knew something that was going on with them in school or at home that might be of interest, I might ask a question, but really engaging them as worthy of being engaged with.
Yes. I love that word worthy, because that is the value that we are passing on to the children, that whatever else is happening in the environment isn't as important as just having that moment with you. And a lot of times we get really busy, especially in education. We have lots of kids, we have parents, we have lessons, we have all kinds of things happening. And we want to make sure that anyone that comes into that environment knows that they're welcome. This is what I would call a generosity of spirit, a generosity of our heart, of opening our hearts up in the simplest, easiest way possible.
Gina, I just want to, a few things in the chat, greeting every child at the door, which we just talked about, having a daily check-in, students share their rose, their bud, their thorn, having animal, having like an animal in the classroom or to the classroom and teach kids to care about the animal, whatever it is, whether it's a fish in the classroom, a classroom pet. So these are some other things that are popping up in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All of those things contribute to the grace and courtesy of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis with children and with adults in our environments. So connecting with children is connecting with their purpose. Montessori says it is the capacity of the child to do something useful, which we call enthusiasm. And we all need purpose. It doesn't matter if you're 5 or 3 or 60 or 80. We all have a sense of, where do I fit in and how am I part of this community? And when you look at some of the research that's being done, when you maybe take a look at Bruce Perry's book, he talks a lot about that sense of purpose and belonging to something. They can belong to one person. We could be the person that connects the child to the entire world. It doesn't necessarily have to be their parent or someone in their own family. So giving children purpose, giving them purposeful work is essential to their growth and development and their connection within the community. So when we think about this in a Jewish way, how are we connecting them to the rituals and ideas that are really the foundation of who we are as a community? It's something to really think about, it really consciously. Is everyone involved? What about people that don't know about them? What about children that don't experience this in their home? What about the adults that are coming in that may not understand what you're talking about? And that's when I started thinking about the ideas of Kabbalah. That's what really pushed me forward, was how do we simplify things so that we can be welcoming with the ideas that are really important to us. So sometimes we have to boil it down and boil it down and boil it down, because we can get so into this idea, we can get as deep, go down that rabbit hole, but in truth, we need to simplify everything that we're doing, in my opinion. So this is another great book, and I think Susan is going to put this in the chat as well. Inspiring Wonder, Awe, and Empathy. It's a really wonderful book. And Susan, would you mind reading this quote?
I would love to. I believe that it is the teacher's challenge to connect spirituality with every child in the classroom, not just academically, but with a sort of Buberian I-thou connection, and build from there. The depth of that connection will determine the extent of the learning which will occur.
Thank you so much. I think, as educators, we have a learning agenda that we want, but children are not able to learn until they are able to connect and to trust and to feel comfortable. So all of these really amazing things that we're doing, you have to step back a couple paces and say, how are we connecting first? And then they're able to learn. And this in brain research is shown over and over and over again. So the way that we know that children are not connecting and not learning is when they get overwhelmed. That's usually when there's a lot of behavioral issues in any environment. Doesn't matter if they're 3 or if they're 13. When the behavioral issues start to come into play, or when adults stop participating, they don't come, they don't talk, they don't want to be involved. It's because they're not either connected to it or they're overwhelmed with the information. So just something really important to think about. So Hesed in action. How do we support children connecting with children? So it's not just about children connecting with us. How do they connect with their classmates? How do they connect with their community members? Children comforting each other, partner painting, partner learning. Are we supporting this? Are we actually helping children to get connected? Because a lot of times, if you think about like merging onto a highway, they don't know how to merge in. And it doesn't matter, again, if they're teenagers or they're young children, they might not know how to do it. They might feel awkward or not have those social skills. So it's really our job to be that connector and to help children to kind of comfort and partner with each other. And it starts with them seeing us do that and our participation in it. So just to be conscious about that, when you see that children don't want to participate or are not interested, they might not know how to do it. So that's another piece of the pie. So Philip Gang is a Montessorian who's written a lot about this idea of cosmic consciousness, of universal consciousness in the world. And he was one of my professors when I was at Endicott College. And this was from a talk that we had. Cosmic consciousness and the evolution of the human is what education is about. It's not about getting children ready for the tests and checking off of our lists of tasks. When done the right way, education is seeding a new human and the cosmic consciousness. Children are connected to the whole of the world, and our job is to show them how to be that bridge, to think about this seeding of a new human, stepping back and taking the checklist and putting it aside, taking whatever curriculum we're supposed to be implementing and going back to the basic piece of how are we connecting in a human way, which is Hesed. How are we offering this raw material to children? How are we showing them how to access that? Because it's inside of them and it's inside of us. It's really important. It sounds like such a big universal idea, but it's basically just about connection, taking the hand of a person and saying, can I help you? Can I show you? Can we do this together? Is it okay? So one way we can do that is by our words. So this is one of my favorite books that I would also encourage you to take a look at. It's called The Hidden Messages of Water. The link will be in the chat. And what Dr. Emoto did was he took water crystals and he put them in a microscope and he froze them, and he wanted to see, because humans are made up of water. We're like 80% water, 80 or 90% water. What would happen if he said words to the water? Would it actually change? And so you can see here, these are the actual pictures of the water crystals. So starting from the left, he played music to them. That's Mozart, the symphony. See how beautiful it is. The song Imagine by John Lennon, saying the word love. I think that looks like a very familiar image to me if you look in the center of love there. I don't know if you see it, but I definitely do. And then he looked at different bodies of water that were polluted, and he would say prayers, but he would take a picture of them before the prayer. So you can see that the crystal is not the same. So the words that we use actually matter. And he has 3 or 4 books where he talks about this and he shows you and documents it in pictures. Look at the one that says, I will kill you. If you look at that closely, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, it actually looks like a person has a gun. So the words of hate that he used, or sometimes he would play some of the, what I would consider like headbanger music, you know, like that really loud where they're talking a lot about violence or things that are very hurtful. They're singing about it. It's very loud. It breaks up the water crystal. And you can see that especially in the I will kill you piece of it. So he did find that violent words, violent music, violent tones actually changed the makeup of the water inside of our bodies. So I would just say to you, take a look at his work, because I found it to be very powerful. The words that we use really matter. When we look at this little beautiful child sitting there, the words that we use with each other are being absorbed. Even if they're not directed at the child, they are still absorbing them. And this makes it, Susan and I were talking about before the presentation, thinking as a parent, you know, conversations and feelings that we have of how conscious we have to be about that, because young children are actually pulling that in. So in a school situation where people don't like each other, sometimes there can be aggression underneath. And this is another place where children might learn that adults don't tell the truth when they feel that something is wrong, but adults say everything is fine. So we've all been in those situations where we're like, are you sure everything is okay? And they're like, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine, fine, fine. But really, it's not fine. So when we think about that, we think about crystals being formed in our body. We think about our heart expanding with words. We want to choose words that are going to open us up, as opposed to words that are going to break us apart. And I think that Dr. Emoto's work really shows that. So lots of work for you guys to do once our hour is over, lots of books to take a look at. So children spontaneously think in a connected way. They are making assumptions and connections all the time. We want to make sure that we're helping them to make the correct connections. We do that with families too, when we don't give them enough information about what's happening. They could fill in the blank with something maybe that isn't correct. So children hold things together and they constantly break down the embankments of disciplines. In this image, we have to see the construction of children thinking and of our educational project. This is from Reggio Emilia, the idea, the early childhood idea, where we're really looking at children and how they're learning to wonder, how they're learning to explore and take chances. Children are connecting the pieces that we are giving them. So let's give them the pieces of kavod, the pieces of hesed, the pieces of tikkun olam. We want to give them the pieces that we want them to put together. And we have to, as adults, have to be really conscious about what is being offered. So you can't authentically teach what you haven't experienced. And this is another really important piece, that if you haven't experienced a pivotal spiritual moment, you might not be able to teach about it because you don't know what that feels like. So it's really important to have conversations and to understand, especially if you're a supervisor, where are your teachers? What do they know about? What are they wondering about? What are they curious about? What are they afraid of? So that by the time they get to the child, they're able to have a more authentic experience. And this was where I started with the words of Kabbalah. I'm certainly not a Kabbalah master and never felt that I could sit at the table with people that were. But I decided that I needed to do my own research, that I needed to find what these words meant for me and how they could live and breathe in my life, so that it wasn't something that was way out there that somebody else does. So many times, especially when we're talking about faith and we're talking about God, it's really far away. It's far away for children and it's far away for us. We want to bring it closer and we want to be able to help children to access it. But first, whoever is experiencing that with a child has to have some knowledge of whatever it is, whatever those concepts are. So if you want to have an environment of Hesed, there has to be a lot of conversations about it. We have to think a lot about, how does this live and breathe in our environment? So according to Brene Brown, the limits of our language are the limits of our words. Okay, so how many words do we have? How are we exploring those? What words are we using? When we talk about social and emotional development with children, we talk a lot about this. We talk a lot about how many ways can we feel happy and how many ways can we feel sad or angry? What are all of the words that we use to describe it? What are some nuances? How deep are we getting? So when we're thinking about spirituality, how many words are we using? How many ideas, how many images are we giving so that children can find one that they connect to, that teachers can find one where they can connect to, because it's really a common experience. So again, as leaders, we are the bridge to help people to understand what they mean. So Haya?
Sorry. When we were doing this work in our classroom, we saw a real transformation when we use the words kavod, chesed, tikkun olam. A child did something, we might say, Eza kavod, you just showed you were so respectful, blah, blah. Or, you have such chesed in your heart, how you helped your friend, da, 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 da. And it didn't take long before the children started recognizing that in each other. Or when a child took something from another child, the child who had originally had it said, that wasn't kavod. And so I think, when we're talking about language and the power of words, I think we have to use the words in context. And the other thing that we found was using the word kavod as opposed to respect, as Gina was talking about, you could feel it raise the internal life of that idea that somehow the word chesed had more resonance than the word respect.
Yes, thank you. It is really important to understand that there is power in words. There is light in words. And like Haya said, we want to continually raise it up in our environments. We want to use these words. We want to make sure that people understand what the words mean. And that might be as simple as just explaining it like you did when you said, you're not saying respect, you're saying kavod, and somebody might have a question about it and you explain it. But the more you use it, the easier it gets to feel the energy of that idea in your environment. Thank you. So Jerome Berryman, the founder of Godly Play, says, we need to give children the language of faith. I love this idea. So how do we speak Jewish to children, right? What are the words we are giving them? Like what Haya just said in her classroom, in her school, are we giving children the food of words, not just this is a prayer that we're going to memorize, but what words are we using easily, kindly? What bridges are we making to their Jewish identity and to the language of faith? So if we can expand our language, we can give that expanse to children so they can begin to pick what resonates with them. And they will. Children are very intuitive, and they will ask the questions and they will find the words that they're connected to. So what other values connect to Hesed? I think that we need, as a group in your own community, to really talk about this. When I did my research, I worked with a school in Maine. Nobody had ever heard the word Hesed in that school. We talked about loving kindness. We were talking about values. I'm going to show you some pictures from that school in a little while. The conversation was really interesting because they started thinking about the ways that they were really generous with their kindness and the ways that they were not generous with their kindness. Something as simple as looking at a child's lunchbox and saying, you know, what was that mom thinking? You think Go-Gurt is a really good lunch? I mean, that's ridiculous. Having that thought didn't really express that value of Hesed, and it put that energy out into their classroom. We talked once for an hour. They came back to me. We talked again. And then I worked with the school to change their school mission because they began to see that it really did matter that these values were integrated in their written work, the work that they do with each other, and the conversations that they have. So think about that. What other values connect to Hesed that are in your environment? Are they important? Are they seen? Can anybody that walks into your environment know what values you embrace? It's a question to ask yourself and to walk around with some new eyes. So as I went along, my first language is art. Everything that I do is visual. So it's my tool for understanding. As I was wrestling with these words and reading and listening and trying to figure out, like, how does this fit into my world? I decided that I wanted to process it through painting. So each word became a painting for me, and then actually multiple paintings, but I'll show you the ones that I selected. And this was my process as I was going through thinking about stars and points of light, stars being prayers and ideas that go out into the universe. This was my visual representation of how does the universe hear me and where am I in the midst of all of this? And this is one of the paintings where, of course, I'm right in the center of everything. And in many of them, that's it. But I wanted to know how I fit into it. So for me to process through art is really important. So how do we let children and adults process complex ideas in their own way? Just think about it. How are you allowing that to happen? Because if we want them to internalize, they might need to process it a little bit differently than we do. We know that some people can hear something, some people have to do it, some people read it. So listen, watch, observe, and be open to different ways to processing the ideas. for young children. This will allow for them to internalize really complex ideas in a very organic and meaningful way. So these were all of my paintings of the pieces of light. So I took the tree of life, and these are the paintings that I came up with, and I have subsequently painted many more to kind of represent the nuances and the multifacetedness of each word. But these were my initial paintings that I picked. So this is Hesed, and I wanted to explain to you a little bit about what I was thinking, that we have two people here that are holding a heart. We have one person cradling that heart, and there are stars, which represent like heavenly ideas and prayers and thoughts, but their job is to really protect the heart, which represents Hesed. So when I think about that, our job as adults is to create a framework where Hesed can grow and live, and we protect this idea as really vital and important. On the top of the painting, you'll see that there are millions of dots representing ideas and prayers and thoughts. And then there's darkness. There's a dark blue. And I was thinking about how important it is that we know that we can see through darkness, that not everything is joyful, but that it's still part of joy, that it's still part of light, that darkness and light can work together, and they don't have to necessarily be good or bad, that all of these ideas merge together. So this is the basic idea of my painting, my interpretation of the word Hesed. So up here, I explained it a little bit more. So I created cards. They're 5x7 cards, and each word has their own card. So I developed the meaning here is my interpretation. Hesed is a Hebrew word that encompasses the meaning and expression of loving kindness or pure kindness. It is the full expression of selfless giving from the heart and the reflection of eternal divine love. Hesed expresses our uniqueness, fully understood in the moments and when we are genuinely ourselves. Hesed is action from the heart of goodness, compassion, the spirit of giving without expecting anything back. Hesed is living in the heart of generosity. So for me, this was the meaning that I came up with. This is how I boiled it down. And then I decided to write a reflection. Think about how you create your classroom environment and how it expresses your value of Hesed. You want children, adults, teachers to walk in your environment and instantly feel the sacredness of loving kindness when they walk through the door. That's the ultimate goal in creating environments where we want openness and generosity and the ability to explore and think and feel joyful. Some of the key words that I came up with, compassion, kindness, mercy, humility, friendship, benevolence, heroic, exemplary behavior, devotion, and piety. These are words that kind of boiled it down even farther. And then I went further and asked some questions, just some guiding questions. What are some ways you show kindness and compassion in your classroom? This would be a great thing to talk with children about. How do we show kindness and compassion? Is it kind and compassionate when we hug a friend who's crying, or help them when something falls off the table and breaks, or we help to pat the back of a child that can't fall asleep? Are these ways that we show kindness and helping children to see that? How does the energy of kindness feel? How does the energy of love feel? How does it feel in your body? So these are ways that we're helping children to connect to social and emotional development, and also to understand what their body feels like, because we know that spirit embraces us inside of our body. How does all of this affect your classroom? How does kindness affect your classroom? When we are kind and gentle and generous, we have a different kind of environment than when we are thinking only about ourselves, when we are not kind and generous. And that's another great discussion point to have within your community. Think about how you create a classroom and environment and how it expresses your value of Hesed. This is really what I would like you to think about. I want you to go back, go to your home, go to your classroom, go to your community and look around. Can you feel it? If you can't feel it, that's where you begin to start to make that change. It could be color, it could be smell, it could be clutter. I don't know, but think about it a little bit. Define for yourself what it means. So what is Hesed and loving kindness? It's caring for the soul of the child. Basically, that's what we need to walk back into our environments and understand. The teacher's role in spiritual education is to reflect the radiance of the universe. We want children to feel the magic, the wonder that comes with understanding that we are connected to all life, that we actually have a job, that we are co-creators with God to create a beautiful, kind world. Using the word Hesed, like Haya said, helps us in our classrooms and in our environments to elevate what's happening. One concrete act of Hesed is to create a beautiful environment that reflects your values and communicates to the child the sacredness of their value. Look in your environment. Is it really beautiful? Does it feel comfortable? What does it smell like? How easy is it to access? These are really important things. As a Montessorian, these are things I think about all of the time. We want children to walk in there and just like, I'm home. This feels good. That's what Hesed is about. Hesed is home. Hesed is home in your heart. Hesed is with you wherever you go. We can access it. We don't have to get it on a certain day or by reading a certain passage. Hesed actually was put inside of us at the beginning of creation. So we need children to resonate with that idea. And they're going to feel that first physically and then in the abstract way. So all of us respond to our physical environments in different ways. So think about how you respond. Like I said, think about eating in a really nice restaurant versus eating in McDonald's. How quickly do you eat? How do you enjoy the food? So the food in our classroom is all of this intellectual information we're giving to children.
Gina, I just want to pop in for 1 second that we just have 1 minute left. So I just wanted to give you that heads up in case you wanted to
zip ahead.
How you're going to close this up.
Okay, so a lot of these ideas about the universal value are going to be in your handout. I'm going to zip right through. I knew it was going to be too long. And let you see that your environment is important. Your words are important. How we connect Hesed. This is going to be in your handout, how we can connect nature with children. You'll all have this so you can kind of see what I've written in here. These are part of the handouts. Love is important. Kindness is important. And we can create Hesed every single day in our classrooms. So thank you for listening. I'm sorry that that is so much information at once, but any questions? We have time for any questions?
I think, I mean, if anybody wants to stay on, that's fine, but I know a lot of people have to leave. So why don't I, for those of you that do have to leave, I just want to thank you very much and thank Gina publicly. This is just really important work. We have a huge responsibility as Jewish educators, and I'm thrilled that you're all here. And I put in a bunch of links in the chat if you want more information, if you want to reach out to Gina. So thank you to everyone. And if you do have a specific question, I'm happy to stay on for a few moments.
Thanks so much for listening.
Kol hakavod to you, Gina. What an amazing, amazing presentation, and the work, how amazing. That's the only word I can think of to use it, Gina.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so nice to see you.
I'm so excited for you. This is amazing.
Thank you.
I really enjoy it, Gina. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Every single moment. Thank you.
Thank you. So much more to say. It's such a big topic. I mean, we could talk about this all day. And we probably should, right? We should be
Yes.
talking about this a lot more.
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoy it.
Good going.
So Gina, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Because obviously this was geared toward, more of the idea of the early childhood set and whatnot. And I'm curious now, what would you say would be sort of the next iteration of it to work with, full communities, and like obviously that have a range of age groups and adults and things like that?
Well, I think it's really important to understand things like the absorbent mind don't stop. So when we think about our environment, that is really, really important. What kind of physical environment we create for people to come into, because that's going to be the first line of defense, if you will. The minute they walk through the door into your classroom, into your community center, wherever it is that you're working, the way that they feel is going to be how they're going to propel forward. And then we think about all of those other unconscious things that we're giving, adults and children. Adults take it in just as much as children. It actually, for young children, probably up to the age of 12 or so, it's actually forming who they are. So it becomes their foundation, that well that they're going back to. As adults, we have all kinds of other experiences that we're going to, that we can begin to very consciously change and integrate into who we are. So I think that it applies. You just have to kind of like step it up and understand it's not as easy, but creating that environment and actually just using words and explaining things. A lot of times we just really take for granted that people understand that what we're talking about. And a lot of times they don't. And adults often won't ask you. They just smile or leave, basically, right? I mean, that's what I found. Does that help?
Absolutely.
Are you working with teens?
So I'm actually working with a variety of age groups, but yes, there's the aspect of that. And the community that I'm working with is really focused on the idea this year, especially tying in with Jewish Disabilities and Inclusion Month, the idea of connection and belonging and the expanse of that throughout the entirety of, just unending options. But I think what you're talking about resonates so fully with that and just brings to the surface that this is something that has to be in existence, whether we're aware of it or not, and whether we're doing it, we have to make that conscious effort. So
Absolutely.
I think it's amazing.
Thank
you.
Yeah, I think, using words and having information for people, but remember that if you're a leader and you have teachers that are in your environment, they have to really have an opportunity to explore this stuff before they go to the next level of teaching it to the community. I created paintings and cards. That was my process. But there's a lot of ways you can do it. They have to